Divine Mother used to often say to us, you have to know who you are, and you have to know who God is. And it's wondered, what could be the relationship with this statement and the statement, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. So I wonder if we make an equation. You have to know who you are and know who God is, plus story or stories equals form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. There's a king, and like the king of last week's story, he had not earned or won his kingdom. He'd inherited it from his father, who was the king, and his father's father before him, for a long lineage. And he was fair and kind, but one day he had occasion to travel by ship to one of his colonies, and during the journey the ship foundered, and only he and his small daughter were able to save themselves by holding on to a piece of driftwood and being carried to a far shore. There they were rescued by a family of fisher people. And after they'd been saved and were warmed and taken care of and fed, the fishermen asked the king what could he do. And of course the king replied that he'd learned to be regal and dignified, but the fishermen didn't even know what this meant. So the fisher people took care of the king and his daughter, but after a while the fishermen said to them, well, you know, we are poor people. We cannot afford to give you charity any longer. It's suggested that maybe if you make your way into the great city here, that you might be able to find a means of subsistence and so forth. But of course, on the road, because the king had no skills and everybody asked him, what could you do? And pretty soon, even dignity and being regal fell away from him. He couldn't even mention that anymore. So he could do nothing. So they were left to people's charity, you know, begging, virtually becoming beggars along the way. Until finally there was a farmer who asked the king what skill did he have, and the king said, I don't have any. And the farmer said, well, at least you're honest about it. He said, well, I'll let you take care of some of my sheep. So this is what the king and his daughter did. They learned that all they had to do was to keep the wolves away from the sheep, take care of them, give them attention, make sure there was pasture around for them and so forth. And they were given a small cottage in which they could live. So indeed, they led a subsistence living. And the daughter grew. And the king resumed somewhat of his dignity, not his regalness, but he wasn't happy, of course. But the daughter grew into this most beautiful maiden. And it so happened that one day the Sultan of that realm was riding by when he caught sight of this maiden, who immediately struck him. He had never seen anything so beautiful, and in that moment fell in love with her. So when he got back to his palace, he sent messengers to the king, who was now a shepherd, asking for his daughter's hand in marriage. So the king, who was now a shepherd, said to the messenger, "What skill does your sultan have?" And the messenger said, "Why, you stupid peasant, the sultan does not need any skills. He's a sultan and he rules over people," etc., etc. So when the messenger went back to the sultan with this, and of course the messenger were again berating this ignorant peasant shepherd, the sultan said, "No, I love this maiden. I will do anything to win her hand." So he immediately went about looking for a skill. And he finally chose the skill of being a carpet weaver. And after some while, he learned this art, and he wove a carpet, which with his own hand, getting on his horse, he rode off up to the place where the king shepherd and the maiden lived, and presented himself. And when the king shepherd asked him what was his skill, he was able to bring out his carpet and show it to the king shepherd. And the king shepherd said to him, "Well, how long did it take you to make this carpet?" And the sultan said, 3 months. "And how long would it keep you if you sold it in the marketplace?" And the sultan made a guess that it would keep them for some months indeed. "Well," said the king shepherd, "if my daughter agrees, then you can have her hand in marriage." And indeed, when the betrothment was taking place, the sultan mentioned to his to-be wife, "Well, you know, I think that a sultan can learn something from a peasant." And it's asked and wondered of you, what reply do you think the betrothed maiden said to the sultan when he made this statement? But besides that, in thinking about that and placing this story as an equation between, you have to know who you are and you have to know who God is. And this story, recognizing that the characters and the elements in it are all parts of our self, equals form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. From our experience, encapsulating the recognition of the characters and elements in this story and other stories, how would it equate to a realization, recognition of the absolute truth of the statement, form is emptiness and emptiness is form? So we could even transpose. You have to know who you are, and you have to know who God is, plus your life equals Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form.
Just going back to what I said before, Alex's comment seems to me to relate to the story, and that is when we suffer, we turn our face to God, and that we come to actually know ourselves more deeply and know that we are the creator.
Absolutely. Yes.
So it's like we turn to something that we seem to think is external, and we actually discover it's really internal.
Absolutely so, yes.
So we come to understand who we are and our connection with that torus, the inner and the outer.
Yes. So how would you sum it up, this equation? What do we discover in our journey? Could it be that we find that God, or what we perceived as God, is no thing? And we discover that who we are is the totality of life. We can never stop life. The movement, the breath is continuous. And when we put them together, we recognize that there cannot be emptiness without form, and form without emptiness. Existence, no thing, without any question. We cannot separate ourselves from life in all its forms, or existence in all its forms. And yet we discover that in our quest to find God, it's no thing at all. So then, I have to make a pitch for my own job, of course. Our story, our life story, then is always whole. It's always going to make the same equation. Wouldn't you agree? It's always going to be, and it's going to fit with everyone. Everyone's on that quest. We could ask to make that statement to everyone. You have to know who you are, and you have to know who God is. We've got the answer, have we? How could it not be? I make a mistake.